Hello and welcome to another Friday Feature Artist interview. I'm Angela, founder of Take Two, and I'm so glad you're here. Today we have the great pleasure of talking with Craig Underhill, a ceramicist based in Cornwall, in the southwest of England, whose work I find utterly captivating. Craig makes slab-built forms that sit beautifully in that space between sculpture and vessel. People often describe Craig as a painter who works in clay. And when you see his work, you'll understand exactly what they mean. The surfaces are layered with marks and colour drawn directly from the Cornish landscape where he lives. The colour of the sea, the fields turning pink in the changing seasons, even a rusted yellow boat in the harbour that gave him permission to use a colour he'd never touched before. That's the kind of artist Craig is. Deeply observant, endlessly inspired by the world right outside his studio door. Craig has been building his practice for over 35 years, through teaching, through the hard early years of just keeping going, through the move to Cornwall that felt, as he puts it, inevitable. He has a wonderful following online where he generously shares his processes and his thinking. But as we'll discover today, there's so much more behind that social media simply doesn't show. We're going to look at his sketchbooks, talk about his glazes, and hear about a brand new body of work that has Craig more excited than he's been in years. One that involves taking raw, unfired clay to the ocean and not quite knowing what the sea will give back. This is a conversation for anyone who has ever stood at the beginning of something creative and wondered if it was worth it, if the years of practice and patience and quiet persistence would ever lead somewhere. And a little spoiler, they do. Please help me in welcoming Craig Underhill. Craig, thanks so much for joining us. I'm very excited to be talking to you today and sharing you and your work with our wider audience. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me on.
No worries. I wanted to start with a question that I think is pretty easy, but I would love to hear how you answer it. What do you think it is about clay that people love?
Gosh, well, yes, that's an interesting question. I think, well, I know what it is about clay that I love. I love the flexibility of it. I think I love the sort of innate softness of it and the way that you can manipulate it to do so many different things. So, I suppose that's what most people respond to with clay, but certainly that's the reason I like clay. I think it's maybe the only art form where you're thinking about form and surface together. And that's something that really interests me.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you can totally see that in your work. Craig, for anyone that hasn't seen your work before, how would you describe what you make?
Well, I make slab-built forms. They're pretty much almost always, but not quite always, vessels, but they're not functional. I like to make forms that have an inside as well as an outside. And I'm particularly interested in surface and mark making. And people often say that I'm like a painter, but I work in clay. So, and I'm happy with that. I think I like that description. I feel like I am a painter, but I just work with ceramic materials. So they're not representational. They are quite abstract, I suppose you'd say, in the sort of, as a general sort of description of them. They vary in size. Sometimes I quite like playing around with scale and thinking about and making pieces that are quite small, but then changing scale and working much larger. So yeah, they've certainly evolved over the years. But I think even when I look back at work that I made sort of 20 or 30 years ago, there's sort of common elements that run through. So there's sort of fundamental things that I've always been interested in ceramics that have sort of remained in my work through that time.
Like what?
Like surface, like mark making, and just exploring mark making, and more than just mark making. It's about composition of marks on a form. That's I think even when I look back to really quite early work, that's what I was interested in.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. You mentioned that your vessels have an inside and an outside. What did you mean by that?
Well, the forms have an inside and an outside. I think because they're not functional, I often question myself about why am I making what essentially are pots.
Yeah.
But there's it's like a continuation of the surface when it goes inside, and I do find that quite interesting for some reason. So the fact that they've got insides is important from an aesthetic point of view or a conceptual point of view, but not a functional point of view.
Yeah. Do you treat the inside of your pots or your pieces, I should say, not pots? Do you treat the inside differently to the outside, or is as much care taken on for the inside as well as the outside treatment?
Well, I always think that just access to the inside is difficult. So I do the inside's really important, but only as a sort of contrast to the outside. They're generally always dark on the inside, a mixture of oxides that I put on the inside that makes them quite dark. But I like that as a contrast. So I think there's a lot of visual contrast in my work, but two of those are the inside and outside of the pot, and the lightness generally of the outside and the darkness of the inside. They sort of one needs the other to sort of work together.
Yeah, yeah. I'd love to share a few images of your work, Craig, as you talk through the next set of questions. And I want to really discuss your color palette because it's so, well, it's beautiful. Let's just say it looks like something that's been found, not consciously decided on. Do you know what I mean? It's really beautiful. Where does that influence come from?
I think very much the landscape that I live in. The piece we're looking at there, I made in Cornwall, so it's made in the last sort of probably the last 3 or 4 years, and the colours just come from going out and looking at the landscape around where I live, and particularly the colour of the sea. I'm really interested in that and how it changes. But in that piece particularly, there's a nice sort of contrast between light and dark as well. Which again, see, there's another contrast there, lightness and darkness together, that I think work well. But I think the changing seasons as well in the landscape, like the things that are growing in the fields, often influence me. When you sort of drive past a field and there's a surprise because it's all kind of pink, but then it might just have that sort of green edge running round the side of it where the hedge has grown. Just going out and looking at the colour of the beaches, the colour of the sand, the colour of the rocks, the colour of the sky, that's where the influences come from. That's where I get my ideas about colour. I don't know whether you've got an image of a yellow piece, but the yellow became that's one of them. Yeah, it became a colour that I would never have used it before moving to Cornwall, because I saw this boat in the harbour that was painted yellow, and it was really rusty, a bit of a wreck of a boat. And the rust and the yellow, the sort of oranginess of the rust and the yellow combined together, and it kind of ran together. And I remember seeing that boat and then taking photographs of it, and then coming back to the studio and making a piece that was sort of predominantly yellow, a bit like that one. And I thought I would never have done that if I hadn't have seen that boat. It was almost like, because I'd seen it almost felt like I got permission to go and use that colour. in a piece of work, and it felt justified.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you say that
Yeah,
because you are influenced by the landscape. If you don't see it in the landscape, then there's kind of
exactly.
that blocker
Because
to not
yeah,
use that colour.
you can't just make up these colours. There's sort of, I think you said it's got a feel of being a bit like an accident, and I like that. I like that it doesn't look it looks sort of maybe quite spontaneous, but I think what I always try and explain to people there's that look to my work, but actually there's a lot of thought and careful planning about colours together, and even where marks go, and everything in the work is sort of quite carefully considered, and yet it might come across as being quite loose and spontaneous, which I suppose it is at times when I'm making it, but there's also like this sort of great deal of thought that goes into it.
Yeah. In terms of the colour, is the parameters that you put around how you use colour, was that something that has always been part of your practice, or is it consciously developed over time and now you're like, okay, this is my colour palette, this is where I get the inspiration from?
I think I feel more in control, like from a technical point of view. I think I'm more able to get the colours that I want. I think when I look back at earlier work, I was working with colours that I could not necessarily colours I wanted, but just colours I could get from a technical point of view. So there's always in ceramics, it's much harder than painting because you can just go and get a tube of paint and mix what you want. But to try and to get the technical knowledge to get the colours that you want, that takes more time than it would if you were a painter, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. So much trial and error. Do you mix your own glazes, Craig, or are you like purchasing underglazes? Or
I buy I mix all my on-go slips, glazes myself, but I often use coloured stains in them to get the colours that I want. But it's quite an instinctive approach that I have. I don't sort of stop and weigh out things. It tends to be like adding half a spoonful of this and a spoonful of that and mixing it together till it looks about right. And I think you can only do that with experience of the materials that I think I take that for granted. And then when I talk to other people, they sound a little bit confused about how you might get those colors. But yeah, it's just the habit of doing it over time that you know that you need a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and then when it's fired, it'll make the color that you want.
yeah, that's the mastery in it.
I think it's just there's nothing other than experience that allows you to do that, I think.
Yeah, and time. I mean, ceramics is time. You've got to put it in.
It really is. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yes, I could talk about that because I've been doing it for like 30, well, more like getting on 35 years, I suppose, since when I started. And over that time, you build up, just a lot of experience that you're always sort of calling on to get the effects that you want.
Yeah. When you look back at some of your earlier work over, the past 35 years, do you see like a thread of connection through your work? Is it always, because I mean, I've only ever seen it online. I mean, I suppose I've only ever researched like your most recent work, which is stunning. But do you look back on your older work and go, oh, it was always there and this style of mine was always there? Like, how did you find this way of working?
Well, that's interesting because when I went to university, first of all, I was in London, and then for the last year of my course, I was in Portsmouth, which is a city on the south coast of England, and it's quite maritime. And I was there. I didn't know that city, and I ended up there, and I ended up making work on that course that was so inspired by the place that I was in. And at the time, I had no idea that I was doing that. It just felt like the right thing to do. But now I look back, I can see that I was so influenced by being in that place. And the same happened when I was in London. I was living in quite a suburban area. It was quite different to the landscape that I was brought up in. And I was responding to that. making sort of architectural forms and buildings. And that was when I was just sort of 19, 20. But at the time, I didn't realize, you don't have the sort of context to realize that that's like a fundamental interest. But now that I look back, I can see that I'm always influenced by the landscape that I live in. Yeah. And I think I do that because I want to get to know something about the landscape. I feel sort of reassured by understanding the place that I live in.
100%. Yeah. I love the geometry I want to call it soft geometry in your current pieces.
Yeah.
When I was really looking at them closely, they are essentially rectangles, but they're so soft on the edges. Is that a conscious decision, or does that emerge through the making process?
It's very much a conscious decision, and I think I quite like the balance between something that suggests maybe it's human-made, but it's also from nature, or maybe it's a human-made form that's been affected by nature over time. So it's been sort of softened, or the hard edges have been knocked off. It's been worn down a little bit. So I think a lot of them are this. I've always been interested in structures, like human-made structures in natural landscapes. And I think, the sort of repeat lines could be something like, fence posts, or some sort of human activity that has left that mark, but it's become a little bit worn down over time by nature. So there's always this balance between, human-made forms and nature kind of working together.
Yeah, I can see that as well. Yeah.
And I think that says a lot about it. Just says a lot about human activity. I think that's what I'm, deep down, that's what I'm interested in. It's human activity in the landscape, the way that farmers plough their fields, or the way that boundaries have been erected around fields, and the way that footpaths have been worn through the sand dunes. That over time, it says something about human activity, and I suppose deep down, I find that really quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's nothing more fascinating, is there, than seeing our effect on the environment around us, and then finding out.
For good and bad.
Yeah, for sure. And then trying to, you kind of reconciling your place within that as well. So what is our
living I think living in Cornwall, that's so apparent as well, because you've got sort of ancient landscapes. You've got structures that are very visible in fields that were made thousands of years ago, like standing stones in circles. There's that sort of arrangement, a human made arrangement of natural forms. But then you've got industry, sort of mining industry, and sort of the remains of mining engine houses, and then harbours that are built in sort of quite remote places, in amongst the rocks. Just the way that people build houses to fit in with a landscape. So there's a sort of it seems very, very evident in Cornwall that that combination of nature and human activity together, and it goes back years.
Yeah. I've never visited Cornwall, but it's definitely on the list. I've seen some beautiful movies that have been produced there, and it does look quite rugged as well, and the maritime history that's there, the fishermen, and
it's very varied as well. It's not, I mean, compared to Australia, it's not a big area, but there is a lot of variety in the types of landscapes as well. So I
Yeah.
don't have to travel far before you're in the sort of moorland, and then you can sort of you don't travel far between the north coast, which is quite rugged and open to the Atlantic, and then the south coast, which is calmer because it's more like the English Channel. So you've got such a big variety of different things going on in the landscape.
Yeah. What took you to Cornwall in the beginning, in the first place?
Well, my partner Emma was brought up in Cornwall, but we lived in the Midlands in England for a long time, and she was very keen to return, and I was quite happy to have a change and live and not live in the Midlands anymore. And we visited a lot, and I loved coming down here. You know, I would come down here and see things, but then go back to my studio in the Midlands and make work about Cornwall. And quite often, I remember on several occasions, I'd be presenting my work at a ceramic fair or in an exhibition, and people would ask if I was from Cornwall, and I had to say no, I don't. You know, I live in Stourbridge in the Midlands, and but it was always a big influence. So it seemed the right thing to do to somehow get here and be in this environment and make my work sort of more genuinely about the place that I was interested in.
Yeah, it was calling you.
Yeah. It took a while to get here, but yeah, we got here eventually.
Yeah, good things take time.
Mhm.
I'd love to share a video that you've kindly shared with us, and it shows you creating one of your works and doing some mark making, but also incorporating what I would call gritty sand. So I'm assuming it's taken from the landscape and put into your work. I'd love to share this video with people, and then we can have a little chat about it.
Right, yeah.
Watching that video and after hearing you speak about a little bit about your process there, Craig, it does feel very organic. But as you said, that organicness, if that's a word, has come over 35 years of exploration, failures, trials, tribulations, no doubt. The way you're just painting quite loosely and with gesture on the ceramics is very appealing.
Yeah, well, that way of working is a bit of an unconventional sort of slab building method that I've developed, where I wrap soft clay around a wooden block. And because the wooden block is still inside when the clay is very soft, it means that the wood's supporting the clay. And it means that I can then make marks in the surface that are a bit different to making marks on what would be a hollow form if it was more conventionally slab built. So you've got this quite sort of sturdy object, and but the clay is very soft, and it means that I can make marks in a different way in the surface of the clay. And I really like that. I like the way that it retains the softness of the clay in the finished piece of work. It's something I don't know how I came across that idea, but I remember doing it years ago, and I had these pieces of work that sat on the shelf for years. And it was and when I came to Cornwall again, I was looking at them more carefully, and I thought I'd start working like that again. And it really did. It kind of really helped the way I was working. The limitation is the form is restricted by the shape of the wooden block that it's wrapped around. So they all tend to be sort of rectangular forms. Although I'm working on that at the moment to kind of change the edges and the outline of those forms.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love working like that. It's nice just to watch that, because it felt there's a sort of looseness when I work like that I really like. There is an instinctiveness. I tend to get in a bit of a flow when I'm working like that I really like. It's like those sort of times when you're in the studio and the time passes without realizing it, and then you look and you've made sort of 6 pieces of work and you think, wow, that was really enjoyable.
Yeah. I love hearing that. I think that's the holy grail, isn't it, for any creator, to find that flow state where time melts away. Yeah.
It's like a state of mind, isn't it, where you're not thinking about other things. You're just so involved in what's in front of you on the bench, your clay and your materials, and everything's sort of at hand, and you can just work. It's an interesting state to get in, and it's not easy. You can't just sort of turn that on and off. Some days aren't like that, but when you do have days like that, it's a great feeling.
Yeah. Do you have any particular rituals that try and help you get to that state sooner? Is it something you try and consciously get to, or is it just, oh, that happened and that felt good? Like that was a good day?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I think I try and switch off from other things. I suppose if I feel I've got other things to do, I try and get them done first, so that I feel like all of that's out of the way, and I need to stop thinking about that, and then I can just go to the studio without anything on the horizon, and then that seems to free me up. I think, tick everything else off the list, and then just go and make my work.
Yeah. And I guess the challenge then comes to not have the list before the making too long, isn't it? To try and preserve your making time.
Because I think if you have that list, sort of, it's going to be in the back of your head somewhere. So better just to get rid of those things, cross them off.
Eliminate. Say no.
If you can, to some extent, I think, not. That's maybe how I try and do things.
Yeah. Well, it's that balance, isn't it? And we're going to get to that, to sort of talking about, the professional practice of things and how you've got there. But I guess it is that balance, isn't it, between, preserving that making time, saying no to, opportunity sometimes if it means, sacrificing making. But at the same time, when you're building a career, you need to be saying yes. You need to be, it must have been tricky to get to that point.
That's tricky all the time. That's tricky at the moment for me, because I get because I think I was thinking about this just the other day, and for years, for decades, I've been so grateful for any opportunity that's come along. So there's something quite instinctive just to say yes when people ask you to do something. But now I'm for quite a while, but I feel that I need to be more selective. I have to turn down things that are good opportunities now. So someone offered me an exhibition next year, and I had to say, it just wouldn't fit into my calendar. I just didn't have the time to do it. So it was a good gallery, exhibition sound good, alongside a painter whose work I liked, and I had to say no because I just couldn't fit it in. Because I'm doing other exhibitions, you can't. I know that you just can't take on everything, and preserve an enjoyment for what you do and the quality of what you do.
Yeah, it's so important, isn't it? And I think that's the trap a lot of us get into, whether it's a ceramics career or running a business or anything in life, isn't it? It's, what do I really want? What have I committed to? And how do I protect a little bit of my sanity?
I think the truth is I'm not very good at saying no. So, but I know I have to try and get better at that.
Yeah, we all do. Don't worry, Craig. You're not alone in there. You're certainly not alone.
Yeah. I'm glad I said yes to the interview, though. I'm glad I went there.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
I'll speak on behalf of everybody listening and watching too. We're glad you said yes as well.
Yeah.
Um,
It's to be honest, it's quite a good opportunity to reflect. I quite like that. I think that's quite important as well. That you asking questions just makes me think about things I've done in the past or how I do things, and I do think that's quite useful. It's a useful thing to do anyway.
Yes. I get that feedback a lot with people that we work with to create courses, because it's quite an intensive process to do that. And when you're doing it, it's kind of hard and all the rest of it. But at the end, everyone always says, like, "Wow, what a process! Like, I've learnt so much about my own practice because I did that work." But at the time, it's you're building a muscle. It's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about your process and your ideas, and we spoke a little bit during our test call, Craig, about your sketchbooks, and I'd love to share a couple of pages of your sketchbooks, and if you could help us sort of understand what your thought process was or is during the process of sketching your work.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, sketchbooks is such a fundamental part of my practice, and I couldn't make my ceramic work without drawing and thinking through ideas in my sketchbook first. It really sort of helps me to understand what I'm trying to do. It helps me think about alternative ways of making a piece of work. And it's very freeing. I think you asked a little bit earlier about what can I do to get into the right state of mind. And one of the things I do is get my sketchbook out and draw. And I find that I can just be so loose and not judgmental, and I can be free to make mistakes or think about things that don't work or take risks about putting shapes together or particular colors together. So it really helps me to loosen up, I think, working my sketchbook. I always say, I've talked to quite a few other artists and students about keeping a sketchbook, and they say they do it. They don't feel like it's very instinctive, but they do it. But they get too precious about the sketchbook. They think that every page has to look amazing. Yeah. And I always say, you should never rub anything out in your sketchbook. All you do is just turn the page. If something's not working, just turn the page and start again. Because even those things that didn't work, I mean, it was you kind of think. It's a record of sort of your thoughts and how you were thinking. So yeah, it was something that was I was asked to do when I was a student, and I had no problem about keeping sketchbooks. And it was odd because I could see other students did it because they had to or they were asked to, and I just thought, this is just great. I love working in my sketchbook. It's just so freeing.
Yeah. So you don't feel any pressure to say, you've got your little thumbnails here, you sort of just working out some designs, some colors, even it looks like some marking potentially here.
Yeah.
At what point do you sort of take it and you go a little bit bigger, and then you go, oh, okay, now I want to bring this one into reality?
Well, yeah, I'll draw for a bit, and I'll have a few. So I have it on that page. You can see there's a sort of theme running through it about these two forms that are put together, and some marks. And then, so I'll do that, just exploring different proportions and compositions, and then one of them might sort of speak to me in some way about it. It just feels the right proportions of the two forms, and then I'll try and visualize what that might look like if I made it in clay, and I begin constructing it. But the thing is that once I start making a piece in clay, it then tends to go in its own direction, because you have to respond to what the clay is actually doing. And although something might look right in 2 dimensions, it might not be right when you start making it. So I always say the sketchbook is a starting point for me, and it's nothing more than that. And sometimes a ceramic piece of work will get finished, and it'll look pretty much like the drawing in the sketchbook. but often it'll just go in its own direction, because the proportions weren't right, or it needed an extra mark or an extra little bit of color here or there. But it really helps me as a starting point. I have my sketchbooks open behind me at the bench that I work at, and I'm always just looking over my shoulder, just for inspiration about some marks that I might put on the surface, or a shape, or bits of color, or whatever. They're so useful to me.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you said that there comes a time where the clay just wants to do its own thing.
Yeah.
I think when I work with clay, I talk to it or I talk to myself. I go, "What do you want to be today?" It's kind of like you can go in with a pan, but the clay, it's like you put.
I think if I stuck rigidly to the drawings that I've done in the sketchbook, it wouldn't. The ceramic pieces would lose their freshness somehow. It's almost like they have to be kind of reborn as an actual object in front of you, not just sort of copying a drawing, two-dimensional drawing, and hoping it's going to be right when you make it three-dimensional.
Yes. And I suppose the thinking's very different too, isn't it? Like when you're working two-dimensionally to three-dimensionally, you can't always anticipate what's going to happen on a flat page. Like, you'd have to be.
And my drawings tend to be very flat. They are very, very much like you're looking at one side or the other. And I tend not to think too much about the depth of the piece. I don't like the complexity of trying to portray something three-dimensional in a two-dimensional form. Paper is flat, so I make my drawings look flat.
Yeah,
I'm not into illusion. I don't want to make it an illusion of being three-dimensional.
Yeah, it's an idea. It's testing some concepts, looking at some different compositions. Using it as reference, testing some color palettes, playing around with some really loose. I love your mark making. Like, it's very, dare I say, childlike. It's beautiful.
Absolutely. I love being described as childlike. That's great. I love that looseness. And you were saying, you showed that piece of work earlier about a rectangle that wasn't quite rectangular, and those drawings really show that as well. They're deliberately meant to be a bit wobbly and a bit like broken at the edges, and so that page of drawings of lots of rectangles that are a little bit wobbly. That's what I want to get across in my ceramics. I don't want to be making perfect straight edges. I want a little bit of a kink on one side. I want to try and replicate those drawn lines that have got a bit of a wobbly edge.
Yeah, and I love that, Craig, because you said earlier, or I asked you a couple of times, is that intentional? And what I've learned is, well, in your work, pretty much everything is intentional. It was intended to be that way. It's not because you don't know how to make a straight slab. You would certainly know how to do that. To
me, because again, one of the first questions you asked is, what do I like about clay? I like the softness. So why would I want to try and make a form that is so hard edged and angular? And I could make it look like it's made in metal if I wanted to, like really sort of sharp. But clay isn't like that for me. Clay's soft and it's organic, and I want my work to look like that.
Yeah. Well, it certainly does. It feels approachable, and it feels like you want to pick it up and you want to turn it in your hand, and I want to run my thumbs over it and feel the texture. All the things you're not allowed to do in a gallery.
Well, you should be allowed. I think ceramics is so tactile. It's so important, isn't it, to pick things up? And that's something I've realized more and more recently, that it's very visual. But when you pick an object, when you pick ceramics up, your fingertips tell you something about or it sort of confirms what your eyes are seeing. You feel like your fingertips and your eyes are kind of working together to help understand that object. So the sense of touch in ceramics is so important. I'm always encouraging people to pick my work up when I go to a ceramic show. People tend to think I'm trying to sort of, it's a bit of a heavy sell when I say pick things up. It's not at all. It's really just because you should try and experience that through touch as well as just looking.
Yeah, I like love touching artwork. I think it's one of the great pleasures of life.
Yeah. But the strange thing is that you can take that idea of touch, and when you go and look at other artwork that you're not meant to touch, and you're a ceramicist, you find yourself touching things you're not meant to touch.
I know.
Like I remember being in a gallery and I touched the surface of a painting without even thinking about what I was doing. It was just quite instinctive. And then the alarm went off because the painting began to wobble on the wall. And I straight away I realized I shouldn't have done that. But it was just, I couldn't sort of stop myself. It was like going to touch something ceramic. I wanted to understand the surface. So I wanted to use my fingertips to do that.
Yeah. I've been dabbling a little bit in ceramics over the last sort of 12, 18 months. And one of the things I like to do, which I think is similar to you, is like embed things in the clay. Here's a little mug that I've made a little while ago now. But just because we were talking about it, like on this design, I actually put some earth pigments and rocks here so that when you hold the mug, you can rub your finger on it like that. And when you instinctively hold a mug like this, so you can feel these rocks.
Absolutely.
So although I know you weren't functional, but
it's an added value, isn't it, to a ceramic object that you can do that.
Yeah, it's very comforting to hold too. You kind of it's a comforting thing to do. Another way that you're embedding the environment into your work most recently is some experiments that you're doing with the ocean, which I found really cool. Really loved it. I'd love to share a little bit of a video there and then we'll have a chat about it.
Yeah. I've had this project that's been going on, running alongside what you might call my more recognised body of work. It's been going on for a while. It's not disconnected from my usual work, but it's a new way of forming my work that I'm really excited about. And it feels like I don't really know what I'm doing. And in a way that's quite exciting. And it's quite challenging because I'm having to solve new problems. And I don't know how relevant it is what I'm doing here, but I'm enjoying it. In fact, more than enjoying it, I'm really excited about it. So therefore I'm doing it.
There's so much to love about that video, Craig, and it's probably not what most people might think of. They think, oh, this is a great idea, I'm going to go and try this, yada, yada, yada. But what I really loved about it was that you were just giving yourself permission to play. You don't know where it's going. And it's something in your practice really exciting you at the moment. And for an established artist, that must be a really beautiful place to be.
Yeah, it felt like a really just something that I felt I'd been thinking about it, planning it, and I just thought instead of just thinking about it, just go and do it. And there was something very freeing and liberating about being able to do that. It felt a bit. If you explained it to other people, they'd think it was a bit crazy and a bit odd to go and do something like that. But there were people watching and curious, and kind of like, what's he doing? But I don't really want to ask. But I don't. None of that mattered to me at the time. It was just that I just wanted to go and do that and try it and see what happened. And It grew out of, you know, I was talking about wrapping clay around a wooden block and enjoying working like that. Well, I used that same technique of wrapping clay around something solid that gave it some strength so that it would, you know, hopefully survive when it was in the water. And the idea of going down to the beach to do that is that, as we've talked about, I like going out into the landscape, particularly at that beach when the tide's out, walking around the rocks, looking at the colour and the textures just watching the tide come in and how it sort of swooshes around the rocks. And I did think I should maybe take some work down there and actually make it in that environment and maybe get bits of stone and hit it against the rock. But then it kind of grew into this idea of actually immersing the pieces into the sea. And then I thought, well, just go and try it, just do it. And I sort of planned it like from a technical point of view, thinking, yeah, it may work. And then I went to have a go and found that I could do that. And it's so interesting. It seems like a bit of a departure in the way that I work. And it's not necessarily what I'm going to start doing and forget doing the rest of my work. It's not like that. It's just like this other sort of thread that's going on alongside my main practice, I suppose.
Yeah. Is it like a time restraint thing, or have you ever sold any of those pieces that have been in the ocean, or is it just something that you're purely doing just for you, for the pure joy of it?
I could have sold them, but I've sold one, and the others are in my studio, and I don't want to sell them, not yet anyway. I just like having them around. It feels like a project that I'm just working on, and I want to do more of it. I think that from a sort of practical point of view, the logistics of it are quite complicated, particularly being able to bring the work back to the studio without damaging it or making any further marks on it, because the clay is so wet, it's so fragile, and I have to get them in the car and drive home, bring them back to the studio, and then just let them dry out in the studio. But just that sort of moving them from the beach to the car, driving them home is tricky. So it takes more time than making conventional work.
I'm sure there's like hundreds of people watching at home right now saying, "I'll come and help you, Craig. I'll come and help you."
Yeah, more and more sometimes I think I need help with things in my around the studio. So yeah, okay, so I'm open to offer.
Keep an eye on Craig's Instagram. He might put a little post out there for a apprenticeship.
Because there definitely I'd like to do some bigger pieces of work like that. You know, I can imagine sort of like much bigger pieces rolling around in the ocean. And the thing I've got a few here actually. There's one here that I keep looking at, but I love the surface that I get when this happens, because bits of sand and bits of shell stick to the surface and leave marks, and you end up with this, like there's a stone up here that got stuck in the clay, and I just tend to leave them in and file them. They have a real tactile quality. They have a different sort of aesthetic. They look sort of worn down. This one I wanted to be like a pebble. We were talking about tactile qualities, and this one was deliberately meant to feel like the size of something you could pick up off the beach. And again, we've talked about like the combination of human-made and naturally formed objects, and this feels like a human-made object that has been naturally formed.
It does. Yeah, it does feel that way. It's interesting that, because I mean, clay comes from the earth, and so we're just returning it to its natural form, really. We're just, giving it back to the earth. And
that was a really interesting thing when I did that film. There's quite a few people responded about the environmental impact of what I was doing. And I don't, any color that's on this, like glaze, that's all put on after it comes back to the studio. All I'm putting in the ocean is clay. and there's nothing more natural. It's come out of the land, and it's sort of going back in the land. I don't add. There's no oxides or color added at that time. It's just the clay.
Yeah.
So I think it's important for people to know, because people were getting quite not really upset, but they did inquire about that. But I would reassure everybody that it's a natural material that's going back into the ocean. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Craig. Yeah, I was wondering about that with the oxides and things, because we've experienced that ourselves. You just have to be really careful about what you're putting into the ocean. So.
Yeah. There's more environmental impact in me driving to the beach to do it than the actual doing it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing a bit about that. Let's call it a side project that you're doing, your love project on the side. I think so important. And I mean, for you, Craig, for those listening, like, how important do you think it is for artists to keep putting themselves in that position of uncertainty and asking what if and pushing the boundaries of convention, especially when it comes to ceramics, which is kind of surrounded and shrouded by rules and regulations?
There are a lot of rules in ceramics. It's very interesting, isn't it? That there's a lot of how to do it properly, I feel, in ceramics that should always be questioned. I think there's always like the right way for the individual to do it. So I do question those things, and yet there are, over the years, I've found the right way for me to do things, and it should be the same for everybody. But in terms of putting yourself in positions where you are pushed, I think it's so important just to keep me interested in what I do. I think there would be nothing worse than just making the same thing over and over again, because you're perhaps selling them, and therefore you become reliant on having to do that because it's making an income. I think it's important that you always explore new avenues and push the boundaries. And sometimes in my work, I think that evolution is slow and gradual, but that's fine as long as there's some evolution going on. That's really important. Important artistically, but important just from a point of view of keeping me interested in what I'm doing.
That's right. I was going to ask you if there was like a type of tension between, your exhibiting work and your commissions, things like that, with this more experimental work. Like, is it pulling you one way or another? But I think if you found that balance between it's working at the moment it's just turning the cogs in the background, and it'll work.
Again, it was interesting talking to somebody that came to my open studios the other day, and she was a ceramic artist. She was from Australia, actually, and she was talking about experimentation, and I said that I feel like I'm in some way I'm always experimenting, even if I'm working towards an exhibition or I'm making a body of work. I don't just think, right, I can rely on what I know and I'll just make this body of work. You can't help yourself but sort of discover new things as you're doing it. So inevitably in every body of work that I make, there'll be some new ideas going on. And I think it's, that's maybe a bit of a risk in terms of, ending up with a body of work that's good enough to exhibit. But I think, I kind of have to do that. It's sort of inbuilt, that idea of experimenting and exploring new ideas. And it's sort of inevitable, because if I go out into the landscape, go for a walk, I see something and I come back and I'm excited about that, then it'll feed into my work. So there's something new.
Yes, like the yellow.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Craig, you went to university at the age of, 19, 20, and your practice has been running, ever since, really. And you did a lot of teaching in the early days, but you always had your ceramic practice on the side of that. What did sort of those early years look like for you? And were you always certain that this was the path for you?
Gosh, yeah. I think because I went to university, I had this idea in my head that I almost felt obliged that I had to make some kind of future in making ceramics. And then when I left university, suddenly I felt very isolated in some ways. Like I didn't. You go from being at university, going to the studio every day, making work, and then you leave university and you've got nothing, except the sort of advice about how to set up a studio, and then you think, well, how on earth am I going to do that? I had to leave university and then start earning a living, and I started working as a technician in the ceramic department of the local college, 2 days a week, and that gave me a little bit of an income. And but all the time I would have some kind of practice going on, and in the early days it was hardly anything. I had hardly anywhere to work. I had hardly any time to do it. I had hardly any money to spend on doing it, but I was doing it in a small way, even if it was just keeping a sketchbook, or having like a tabletop to work on. But I remember thinking, but it was all it never left me that I had to, in some way, keep working. And it's only when you look back now you think that's really quite obsessive behavior, because it would have been so easy to give up and do something else, or just go into teaching full time, and just let that go in a direction that just felt like you've been pushed in rather than wanted to go in. So it took me years really to get to a position where I felt like I was confident about making a body of work that I wanted to put in a gallery, in an exhibition. But I just sort of kept going at it, and I got that feeling at university that this is what I'm going to be doing in some way at some time. It might take time. I can see that I'm patient, but I thought, I'm just going to. That's what I'm going to do. It was never. There wasn't, to be honest, an alternative.
There was no other way. This was your calling.
No, it wasn't even a consideration that wouldn't happen eventually.
And when you were at university and in those early days, did you have a group of people around you, or mentors, or whether they be official or unofficial, that were sort of showing you the way a little bit, or were sort of making it feel like this is possible?
Yeah, that was so important. When I was at university in London and then in Portsmouth, in both of those on both of those courses, there were people. I was introduced to people who were doing what I wanted to do. Some of them were coming to teach us, some of them I was just reading about in books. But I knew that there were people out there who were making a career or a living, or it was just their life that they were doing ceramics. So that really helped me to understand that it was possible. Other people were doing it, and therefore, in some way, I could probably do that.
Yeah, because it's very easy, I think, for the outsiders and people who are maybe just discovering your work for the first time, or have been following for a while, to sort of look at your presence online, and you've got an amazing following, and congratulations for that. But you sort of said something to me earlier that sort of stuck as well. You said sort of social media tells the best bits. So it's very easy for us to sort of look at you and your success and go, oh, wow, that must have been easy. But what are the bits that it doesn't show?
The time spent doing the years that went by of just plugging away at it, and it doesn't show. It doesn't show the sort of hard work, I suppose. It's been terrific for me, social media, in building an audience for my work internationally, which has been great. but it does kind of just show the sort of top layer of all the best stuff, all the juicy stuff, all the nice bits, and sometimes I just think maybe perhaps I take it for granted that people just know there's more behind it than that. But I think in some circumstances people don't know what's behind it.
Yeah. You're probably right. People might think.
And that makes me think that maybe I should post stuff, more stuff about the sort of day-to-day mundane sort of stuff. I don't know. I'm not expert on social media. I just what I do with social media is just try and communicate what my work's about. That's it, really. I've never been trained. I've never had any advice about how to do it. It's grown from teaching. When I've been teaching, I'm having to show people how to do things, and I think that's been a really useful skill in using social media. I'm trying to communicate to people how I do something so that they can understand what I do better, and if they understand what I do better, then they're going to appreciate my work more.
That's a lovely way to look at it. And I think you share so generously as well on your site. You give away, whether it knowingly or not, you give away little tips and insider knowledge and inspiration and things like that. But I wanted to ask you, Craig, because of that generosity that you do, and you share your beautiful images, which you take by yourself. You also take your own photographs, which is incredible. But what would you say to the person sitting at home watching this right now thinking, I just want to make work just like Craig's?
You'll get bored. A lot of people tell me that I'm generous sharing, and I share. I know I share a lot of stuff, but what I can't share, or what you can't really share, is how I see the world. I make my work about how I see the world in the place that I live. And if someone was to kind of mimic that, I wouldn't mind. That's okay. But the thing is, you'll get bored doing it because it's not really from you.
Yeah. So true.
As a starting point, I'm sure when I was a student, I would look at people like John Maltby and Robin Welch, and I would try and sort of maybe not copy, but you take elements, quite directly from what they were doing. And that helped me understand what I was trying to achieve. And if people do that, looking at my work, then that's fine. But eventually that has to lead you on your own path.
It's so true what you said, people will get bored, because I often hear this question too about, how do you sustain doing what you're doing for 35 years? Like, well, it's because it's your calling, it's your way of seeing the world, it's your way of expressing yourself. And if you're trying to emulate that in someone else's work, you're going to get fatigued or bored, or you'll be jumping focus every 5 minutes when the next shiny thing comes along, right?
And also people will call you out on it as well. Because like you said, a lot of people know my work, and I know other artists who have looked at my work and have made pieces that have been influenced by it, and they get comments that people will come to their exhibitions or their stand at a ceramic fair and say, "Oh, you're making work like Craig Underhill," and for them that must be that wouldn't be a great comment, because you want to be making work that looks like it's come from you, not that it's come from somebody else.
Yeah. Well, you certainly own that space, Craig, and good on you. It's beautiful. For a bit of advice for someone who's sitting at home as well, and they're thinking, but Craig, how do I find my own style? What would be your advice to them?
Gosh. That's hard, really, isn't it? Because it's how you respond to the clay. I feel it's important to say something about how you see the world. It's about like it's come out of your brain and your eyes and your way of viewing the world. It's very personal. Be as personal as you can.
I think that's really
whether
great.
it's to do with landscape or not. You know, it might be to do with all kinds of different things, but you know, things that are important to you, things that make you you.
Things that make you you.
Yeah, if that makes sense.
100%. It does make sense. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I think that's where the bravery comes into it with being an artist, because you really, as an artist, I believe that you're putting your insides on the outside for the world to judge. You're going to put it out there online. And if it is truly coming...
Maybe the advice would be to understand yourself first. Yeah.
Understand yourself first. Yeah.
And
then, we actually have a whole course on that.
And then you're more likely to be able to put that out in the work that you make.
Yeah, it's so true.
And people will respond to that. People love that. People love that it's come from within you. You know, that's what people really respond to.
And if you don't, they weren't your people in the first place, right? Or they weren't your audience. Like, it's okay if people don't like your work. It's okay.
Isn't it fine? Yeah. Maybe they don't speak the same language, you know, in some way. So that's fine. But the people that do is great. Yeah.
Craig, looking back at the younger version of you, let's say 19, starting out, not quite, you know, knowing how all of this is going to unfold, but knowing there's a path there for you, what do you wish someone had told you back then? And another bit of advice, if you wouldn't mind, one that we could offer to someone who's in the thick of it. They're mid-career, or they're maybe, you know, a bit like the seed pod under the ground, and they've been growing and they've been pushing really hard, but they haven't quite broken through the surface yet, but they're so close.
I think if you maintain an interest in what you're doing, that allows you to keep going. It's tough, isn't it? I know it's hard. You know, lots of people would want to be doing what I do. But all I can say is, you know, just be determined and keep at it. But keep enjoying it.
Yeah, so important. Yeah, if you're not enjoying it, it's not worth it.
Yeah. And it will show up. It will show up, you know.
Yeah, you can't hide it. Craig, it's been so wonderful getting to know you and talking about your work and your philosophies, and, you know, just the advice that you've just given us. Thank you so much on behalf of everyone watching. I know that they'll be leaving comments, so thank you so much for that. But what's next for you? Like, what are you excited about at this point in your career, or even the year? Like, what are you excited about at the moment?
Well, I've got lots of things coming up on my year planner that's stuck in the studio. The next thing on the horizon is a ceramic fair in the UK, and I feel, well, I say the next thing, the work for that's mostly made, but I have to go and select what I'm taking and actually go and do the fair. So that's the next thing. But then later in the summer, I'd like to be doing more of these pieces. I'd like to go back to the sea and make some more pieces. Hopefully I'll get someone to help me.
I'm sure you will. You probably get lots.
And I've got lots of workshops coming up as well. Sometimes I think I say too many yeses to doing workshops, but I've got workshops coming up later in the year as well, and they're sort of mapped in for next year too, in different places.
Wow. Well, for everybody that's watching, keep an eye on Craig's Instagram. He shares also exhibition books, I believe, that you create of your work that you sell. There's workshops available. Anything else you'd like to plug, Craig, while we're here? Let's do it.
Well, I suppose my next online exhibition is going to be in August. So I'm going to put, it might be a little bit sort of slimmed down, but probably about 10, 15 pieces on my website on a day in August. I'm not sure which day it's going to start, but that's coming up. And that's the chance for people who live anywhere in the world to buy a piece of work. So I think it's quite good from that point of view. You don't have to live in the UK. You don't have to visit me you can look at it online and you can buy a piece of work from me from my website. And just keep an eye on social media for the actual date. It does start at a particular time and it does get busy, but good luck.
Thank you, Craig. We'll all be sitting at our computers with our fingers ready to click.
Yeah.
We'll put all those links as well to Craig's website and Instagram on our show notes, and all the images that we've shown today as well will be on our show notes. And Craig, if you have brought people to us that have not ever met us before, I just wanted to say a big warm welcome to new people that have found Take Two. We run these interviews every Friday. And we get to speak to a whole range of different artists. And I just love speaking to ceramicists. So thank you, Craig. I really appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Craig. See you.